Two of the wisest people who ever wrote about money gave the exact opposite instruction, and they gave it about the same act. Napoleon Hill said that the habit of saving is the cure for the fear of poverty, that a man who has laid something aside can look the world in the eye and say no, and that debt is a merciless master. Florence Scovel Shinn said that hoarding and saving invariably lead to loss, that money withheld tends toward poverty, and that the law always stands behind the one who spends fearlessly. One of them is telling you to keep it, one of them is telling you to let it go. Both of them were right, and tonight you are going to hear why. Because underneath those two instructions, there is a single law that neither of them ever softened. Money does not answer the amount. Money answers the state you are in when you touch it. Saved out of provision is one thing. Saved out of fear is another thing entirely, and the money knows the difference even when you do not. That is the whole secret, and almost nobody has told it. So here is what the next 3 hours are for. You do not have to concentrate, and you do not have to remember any of it. This has been written slowly and gently on purpose, so that the ideas go on working long after you have stopped following them. If you drift, that is not you missing it, that is you receiving it. Belief 1. Nothing about money was ever waiting for your permission. There is a sentence in Think and Grow Rich that most readers slide straight past, and it is one of the most important sentences Hill ever wrote. He said that a poverty consciousness will voluntarily seize the mind which is not occupied with the money consciousness. And then he added the part that matters. A poverty consciousness develops without any conscious application of habits favorable to it. The money consciousness has to be created to order. Read that again slowly, because it changes everything about tonight. He is not saying that a mind with no money beliefs in it is a blank mind. He is saying there is no such thing as a blank mind. Something grows in unattended ground, always. If nobody plants it, it plants itself. Neville Goddard said the same thing from the other side, and he said it about the hour you are in right now. Unless you consciously and purposely define the attitude of mind you go to sleep in, he wrote, you go to sleep in the composite attitude of the whole day. Every reaction you had, every calculation, every small clench when a number came up on a screen, all of it mixed together and handed down to the part of you that never questions anything. So the choice was never between programming yourself and leaving yourself alone. Nobody has ever been left alone. The choice is only ever between the crop you chose and the crop that arrived on its own. Goddard put it plainly. While you are awake, he said, you are a gardener selecting seed for your garden. And here is the thing about your garden. It has been producing for years. It has been faithful. Whatever went into it came up exactly as it went in, on schedule, to the last detail. That is not a fault in the machinery. That is proof the machinery works, which means the machinery will work just as faithfully with better seed. Nothing has to be repaired in you. Nothing has to be rebuilt from the ground. The soil is good, the sun is up, and the only thing that has been missing is a hand choosing what goes in. Tonight, your hand is on it. You are not fixing yourself. You are planting on purpose for the first time. The ground in you is rich, and it always has been. It takes what you give it. Tonight, you are giving it something good. Belief 2. You learned money from people who were frightened of it, and that was never your fault. You did not choose your first opinion about money. You absorbed it the way a child absorbs an accent, long before you had any way to check it. Shinn watched this happen in ordinary houses her whole working life. She wrote that children are sensitive and receptive to the thoughts of the people around them, and that they very often outpicture the fears of their parents. Not the words, the fears. She gives one small example that has never stopped being true. A friend asked a woman whether her little girl had had the measles yet. The woman answered, promptly and cheerfully, not yet. 2 words. And in those 2 words, she had already prepared a place for the thing she did not want. Money is taught the same way, and it is almost never taught out loud. It is taught in the pause before a bill is opened. It is taught in the tone somebody uses for the word expensive. It is taught by a face that changes when the subject comes up at a table. A metaphysician once said something to Shinn that she repeated for the rest of her life. If you do not run your subconscious mind yourself, he told her, somebody else will run it for you. That is not an accusation. Read it as an inheritance notice. Somebody ran it. They ran it with the best material they had, which was usually fear they had inherited from somebody else who had inherited it in a harder decade than yours. They were not wrong to be careful. Many of them were careful for very good reasons, and their care is probably the reason you are here at all. But careful is not the same as true. And a rule that kept somebody safe in one life is not automatically a law of the universe. So tonight, nobody is on trial. There is nothing to forgive and nobody to blame. And no part of this asks you to think badly of anyone who raised you. All that is happening is that a set of instructions written by people who loved you is being read, at last, by the person it was handed to. You get to keep every bit of it that is useful, and you are allowed to set the rest down. You were given fear about money by people who were given it too. You are the one who gets to stop passing it on. That is finished with you. You are free to be careful and unafraid at the same time. Tonight, you are learning how. Belief 3, money is not your problem. Your picture of money is. Bob Proctor built a whole book on one observation, and it is the observation that most people get backwards their entire lives. He noticed that wealthy people are never uncomfortable when money comes up in conversation, and he said the obvious explanation is wrong. They are not comfortable about money because they have it. They have it because they are comfortable about it. Sit with that for a moment, because it inverts the order everybody assumes. Everybody assumes the ease arrives with the balance. It does not. The ease arrives first, and the balance follows the ease. Proctor had a way of proving this to a room in about 10 seconds, and you can do it lying down. Picture yourself in a room with people you know, friends, family, the people whose opinion actually registers with you. Now picture yourself telling them, calmly, in a normal voice, that you intend to become wealthy. Not wealthy in a vague someday way, wealthy enough to live exactly as you choose. Notice what happens in your body. Most people flinch. Most people immediately want to add something to soften it. Most people want to laugh, or say they are joking, or explain that they only mean comfortable, not rich, because rich sounds greedy. That flinch is not modesty. That flinch is the belief. That is the whole thing, showing itself for a second and then hiding again. And notice what the flinch is actually made of. It is not made of arithmetic. Nobody flinches because they have done the calculations. The flinch is made of a picture, and the picture is of somebody in your life reacting badly, which means the thing standing between you and money was never money. It was a face you imagined making, and a sentence you imagined hearing. Proctor's fix was almost insultingly simple. Get comfortable first. Sit with the idea of having it until the flinch stops. Because the deeper mind cannot tell the difference between having it and quietly, repeatedly living in the idea of having it, and once the flinch is gone, the whole subject stops being loaded. Then money becomes what it always should have been. Not a test of your character, not a verdict on your worth, just a subject, like weather, that you can discuss without your shoulders coming up. Tonight, you can begin to let the flinch go. Nothing is being asked of you but ease. Money is an easy subject for you. It is comfortable. It comes up and nothing in you tightens. Belief 4, the nugget in your pocket was brass the whole time. There is an old French legend that Shinn used to tell her students, and of everything in her books, this is the one that ought to be read out loud on nights like this one. A poor man was walking along a road when a traveler stopped him. "My good friend," said the traveler, "I can see you are poor. Take this gold nugget, sell it, and you will be rich all your days." The poor man took the nugget home, hardly able to believe his luck, and something happened to him almost immediately. He found work, he kept it, things came his way that had never come his way before. And the strange part is that he never sold the nugget. He never needed to. Year after year, he prospered, and by the end of his life, he was a genuinely wealthy man. One day, an old man now, he was walking along a road and met a poor man coming the other way. He stopped him and said the words that had been said to him all those years before. "My good friend, take this nugget, sell it, and you will be rich for life." The poor man took it gratefully and carried it to be valued. It was brass. It had always been brass, It was brass on the first road, in the first hand, on the first day, and it had made a man rich for a lifetime anyway. Now, be careful with what that story is actually saying, because it is not saying that the nugget did nothing. The nugget did everything. It just did not do it the way anyone assumed. That man did not get rich because he owned gold. He got rich because for the first time in his life, he walked around like a man who had something. He stopped moving like somebody with nothing to lose and started moving like somebody with something behind him. He could afford to be steady. He could afford to say no. He could afford to wait for the right thing instead of grabbing the first thing. And every one of those was free. Every one of those was available on the morning before the traveler arrived. Shinn drew the only conclusion there is to draw. Every one of us, she said, has a gold nugget of our own, and it is not in a pocket. It is a consciousness of gold. It is the private, unargued sense of being someone with plenty behind them. Which means the thing that changed that man's life is not something you have to be given. Nobody has to hand it to you on a road. You can pick it up tonight, lying exactly where you are, and it will work exactly as well as it worked for him, because it is the same mechanism and it was never the metal. You have something behind you. You always have. Feel that as an ordinary fact, not a hope. There is plenty behind you and plenty in front of you. You can afford to be steady. You can afford to wait for the right thing. Belief 5. You have never once received more than you believed was available. Shinn kept a note about a student of hers, and it is one of the most quietly devastating paragraphs in her book. The student needed $600 by a certain date. He did the work. He held to it, and the $600 arrived on time in an ordinary way. Afterwards, he learned that he had come very close to receiving $1,000. He was given $600, she wrote, as the result of his own spoken word. She was not being cruel about it. She was pointing at something structural, and she stated it as plainly as it can be stated. It is impossible for a person to release more than he thinks is possible, because he is bound by the limited expectancies of the deeper mind. If you want to receive in a larger way, she said, you have to enlarge the expectancy first. Then she added the line that stays with you. Many a man is building himself a bungalow in his imagination when he should be building a palace. Now here's the part worth thinking about slowly, because most people hear this and immediately feel behind, and there is nothing behind about it. The 600 was not a punishment. The 600 was accuracy. He asked accurately and he received accurately. The system did exactly what it is built to do, without malice, without judgment, and without rounding up, which means it will do that again at any figure you like. There is no penalty for the larger number. It does not cost more effort to hold a bigger picture than a smaller one. A palace and a bungalow take exactly the same amount of imagining. Nobody is standing at the top, keeping score of who asked for too much, and nothing extra is deducted from you for having been specific. The only reason most people ask small is that small feels polite, and asking large feels like it invites a fall. But there is no fall in the mechanism. There is only the size of the request. Shinn treated this as a thing to be deliberately grown rather than waited for. She said a person must enlarge his expectancies in order to receive in a larger way, and that as somebody grows in financial awareness, he should begin asking that the enormous sums which are his by right reach him under grace in perfect ways. Notice that she did not say, wait until you feel worthy of the larger figure. She said the expectancy is the thing that gets stretched, and that the stretching is the work, and that it is done on purpose in advance by somebody who does not yet have the money. Which means the sequence is not earn, then expect more. It is expect more and let the earning follow the expectation, which is the order every single person in tonight's stories actually moved in. So, tonight, without effort, and without arguing with yourself about whether you deserve it, let the figure in your mind be the true one, not the one you would say out loud at a dinner table, the one that would actually cover your life comfortably, with room in it for other people. That figure is not greedy. That figure is just accurate. And accurate is the only language this thing speaks. You are allowed the larger number. It costs nothing extra to hold. Your expectancy is widening tonight, quietly, while you rest. There is room in you now for more than you used to allow. Belief 6. Wanting it is not the same as expecting it, and only one of them works. Proctor drew a line that clears up years of confusion, and once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. Desire, he said, is the motor. Expectation is the magnet. Desire moves you toward the thing. Expectation moves the thing toward you. And most people spend their whole lives with the motor running and no magnet switched on at all. His phrase for it was blunt. Desire without expectation is nothing more than wishful thinking. Then he said the sentence that explains almost every disappointment anybody has ever had with this material. The vast majority of people, he wrote, wish positive and expect negative. You know exactly what that looks like from the inside. You picture the good outcome. You genuinely want it. And underneath, running quietly the whole time, is a settled private assumption that it will probably fall through, the way things generally do. Both of those are in the mind at once. And Proctor's point is that only one of them is doing the work. He noticed something in his own life that you can check in yours. Every single time you actually reached something you were after, you did not only want it, you also expected it. There was a quiet, unremarkable certainty about it, so ordinary that you never noticed it as a mental act at all. It just seemed obvious that it would happen, and then it happened. That is the state. It never feels dramatic. It feels boring. Expectation, when it is real, feels like knowing what day of the week it is. Proctor also gave a reason for patience that is worth carrying with you. He said the picture you hand over is a seed, and seeds have a gestation period. Nobody digs up a seed on the 4th day to check on it. The delay is not evidence against you. The delay is part of the design. So there is no need to force anything tonight. Forcing is what people do when they are trying to make up for missing expectation, and you are not going to be missing it. You are going to do the small, quiet, unspectacular thing instead. You are going to let it be obvious. It is coming. Not because you pushed, but because it was always going to. You expect good things now. It is quiet and it is settled and it does not need proving. Belief 7. Money is a servant and it has been waiting years for instructions. Proctor was firm about the order of authority, and he was firm because he had watched intelligent people get it backwards and pay for it. Money is a servant, he said. You are the master. Be very careful never to reverse that equation. And then he gave the test for whether you have reversed it, which is not the size of your balance. It is this. Do you love people and use money? Or have you started quietly to use people and love money? He had seen brilliant people do the second one without ever noticing the moment they turned around. But the more useful half of his teaching on this is about what a servant is for. A servant standing idle in a hallway is not being kept safe. It is being wasted. Money, Proctor said, is valuable only while it is being used. Taken out of circulation, it becomes as worthless as old newspapers stacked in an attic. He liked to prove it with something ordinary from his own house. He kept a silver beer stein on a bookshelf, and every time he came in, he emptied the change out of his pockets into it. And he pointed out that for the whole time that cup was filling, every coin in it was doing precisely nothing. Not growing, not helping, not even earning interest. Just sitting in a cup, being a coin. Then the cup got full, and he gave it to one of the children, and the money flew into action within the hour. One of them took it straight off to buy golf lessons. And he had a harder story from his own street when he was a boy. There was an elderly man he was friendly with, a junk dealer, who pushed a small cart up and down the block collecting what other people had thrown away. He grew more stooped every year, and shortly after the war, he died alone. When the police went into the house to take stock, they found the rooms full of old furnishings, and they also found more than $100,000 in old bills packed into boxes and scattered through the house. The Toronto paper put it on the front page the next day and asked the obvious question, which nobody could answer. Proctor asked himself the same question as a boy, and it stayed with him for life. Why would a man live like a pauper with all that in the house? And the answer, when he was old enough to see it, was almost unbearably simple. He lived like a pauper because he was afraid that spending would make him one. So he became one on purpose for years while sitting on the cure. None of this is an argument for carelessness. Proctor drew that line himself, and he drew it sharply. Circulating and squandering are not the same act, and anyone who cannot tell them apart should learn the difference quickly. It is an argument for something gentler. Money in motion is money doing its job. And a life where money moves through easily, in and out, without a clenched hand at either end, is not a reckless life. It is the only arrangement in which money has ever behaved well. Money moves through your life easily now. It comes in, it does its work, and more follows it. You are the master here, and you always were. It is a good servant, and it likes being used. Belief 8. Having it will not turn you into someone worse. There is a story that has been told in prosperity books for 100 years, and Proctor told it too, and it needs handling honestly, because half of it is true and half of it is folklore. The story goes that in 1923, at the Edgewater Beach Hotel in Chicago, 8 of the wealthiest financiers in the world sat down together in one room. The president of the largest independent steel company, the president of the largest gas company, the greatest wheat speculator, the president of the New York Stock Exchange, a member of the president's cabinet, the greatest bear on Wall Street, the head of the world's largest monopoly, the president of the Bank of International Settlements. Then the story tells you where each of them was 25 years later, and it is grim reading. Now, the meeting itself almost certainly never happened. People who have gone looking for it have found no newspaper that reported it, and one of the men was not even president of the stock exchange in 1923. So put the room aside. The room is a legend. What is not a legend is what became of the men. Take the first one. Charles Schwab ran Bethlehem Steel and built it into the second largest steel maker in America. He was one of the great industrialists of his age. He was wiped out in the crash of 1929, and by 1933, he could no longer pay the property taxes on the mansion he had spent $7 million building. He died in 1939 owing more than $300,000, and here is the detail that stays with you. Had he lived a few years longer, he would have watched Bethlehem Steel flooded with wartime orders and his fortune restored. Richard Whitney went to Sing Sing. Jesse Livermore, Leon Fraser, and Ivar Krieger all died by their own hand. Albert Fall was let out of prison so that he could die at home. Now, the way that story is usually told, the moral is that money destroys people. And Proctor, who told it, refused that conclusion flatly. He said that all it shows is that these particular men learned the art of earning money and never learned how to live. And he pointed out the obvious thing that gets left out. There are a great many wealthy people who are perfectly happy, who do an enormous amount of good with what they have, and who live steady, healthy, well-balanced lives, and nobody writes cautionary tales about them because there is no story in a man who is fine. That is the correction to make tonight, because the fear underneath is real, and it is quiet, and a lot of people carry it without ever saying it out loud. The fear is that money will reveal something ugly in you, that you would become careless with people, that you would stop being kind. It will not. Money is not a personality. Money is a magnifier, and it magnifies what is already there. A generous person with money becomes visibly generous. A frightened person with money becomes visibly frightened, which means the honest question is not whether you can be trusted with it. You already know the answer to that, and the answer is yes, because you have been careful with far less for years. You can be trusted with plenty. It will not change who you are. It will only give you a larger place to be it. You stay yourself, kind, steady, and provided for, all at the same time. Belief 9. 2 people can live the same day and write 2 completely different laws. Shinn knew a man who used to say the same thing about the same event over and over for years. "I always miss a car," he said. "It invariably pulls out just as I arrive." His own daughter, living in the same house, catching cars at the same stops, said the opposite. "I always catch a car. It's sure to come just as I get there." And Shinn recorded the outcome without dressing it up. This went on for years, exactly as each of them described it. Each of them, she said, had made a separate law for himself. One of failure, one of success. Notice what is not being claimed there. Nobody is saying the man was punished for pessimism. Nobody is saying the streetcars were listening. What she is describing is much more ordinary and much harder to escape. He had noticed the misses and filed them. She had noticed the arrivals and filed them. He left the house at the time a man leaves when he expects to be late. She left at the time a person leaves when she expects to arrive. And each of them collected a lifetime of evidence proving the thing they had already decided, and each of them thought the evidence had come first. That is how a money belief protects itself. It does not argue with you. It just quietly arranges the day so that it keeps being right. Shinn watched the same mechanism in something people usually laugh at, and she was fair about it. A horseshoe, she said, contains no power. A rabbit's foot contains no power. But when a person picks one up and believes it will bring good fortune, that belief creates expectancy in the deeper mind, and expectancy attracts what she called a lucky situation. She even admitted she had seen it work. She was walking with a friend who was in real despair, and the friend picked a horseshoe up out of the street and was flooded with hope. And Shinn's comment is honest and generous. At that moment, she said, it was about the only thing that could have registered. Her hope became faith, and the faith did the rest. She had a caution too. 2 men in her class had run months of good business and then watched it collapse. And when she looked into it, she found that both of them had stopped their own practice and were carrying lucky charms instead. Her instruction was not to burn every ornament in the house. It was simply to know where the power sits. The object only ever gave you a feeling of expectancy. The expectancy was always the working part. Hill described the same thing in engineering language, and it is worth hearing beside her, because between them, they cover both halves of it. Fortunes gravitate, he said, to those whose minds have been prepared to attract them, just as surely as water gravitates to the ocean. Water going to the ocean is not a reward. It is not a favor granted to well-behaved water. It is simply the shape of the ground. So the man missing his streetcars was not being punished, and the daughter catching hers was not being blessed. Each of them had shaped the ground over years without knowing that was what the noticing was doing. So the practical piece is this: you do not need a charm, and there is no harm in one. What you need is to stop collecting evidence for the wrong law. You are one of the people things work out for. You have plenty of evidence for that if you look for it, and tonight you can start letting yourself notice it. Money arrives at the right moment for you. It has before, it will again. Belief 10. You can only ever receive what you can see yourself receiving. Shinn wrote one sentence that contains the whole architecture of this. Man can only receive what he sees himself receiving. And then she reached for an image out of the Old Testament to show how literally she meant it. The children of Israel, she said, were told they could have all the land they could see. Not all the land that existed, not all the land they deserved, all the land they could see from where they stood. That, she said, is true of every person alive. He has only the land within his own mental vision. Now, she was too honest to leave it there, because she knew what actually happens to people at the edge of something good. She went straight on to the next part of the story, and the next part of the story is the one nobody quotes. When they reached the land they had been promised, they were afraid to go into it. They looked at it and said it was full of giants, and that in their own sight they were as grasshoppers. And Shinn's comment on that is one line long. This, she said, is almost every man's experience. Not some men, almost every one. The picture arrives, the thing you asked for comes into view. And the first honest reaction is not triumph, it is smallness. Who am I to walk into that? Look at the people already in there. Look how easily they move. So, if you have felt like a grasshopper in front of your own goal, you are not disqualified. You are exactly on schedule. That feeling is a documented stage of the process, and it has been a documented stage of the process for 3,000 years. The instruction she gave for that moment is quiet, and it is not heroic. She said the one who knows how this works is undisturbed by appearances and rejoices while he is still in captivity. That is the phrase. Rejoice while you are still in it. Give thanks for the end while the middle is still going on, because the middle is where everybody quits. And she gave the reason it works, which is not mystical at all. Every great accomplishment, she said, has been brought into being by holding to the vision, and often, just before the big achievement, comes apparent failure and discouragement. Just before, not instead of. So tonight, all you are asked to do is widen the view a little. Not fix the plan, not solve the money, simply see more land. You can see further than you used to. The view is widening, there is more in it, and all of it is available to you. Belief 11. Where you started was never a ceiling, and it was never even a floor. Sarah Breedlove was born in December of 1867 in Louisiana to parents who had been born into slavery and were sharecropping the same land they had been enslaved on. She was their fifth child and the first one born free. She was orphaned at 7, married at 14, a widow at 20 with a 2-year-old daughter. She moved to St. Louis and took work as a laundress, and the wage for that work was $1.50 a day. She did that work and went to night school when she could manage it. Now, if there has ever been a starting position that entitled somebody to believe money was for other people, that is it. Nobody would have blamed her. Every single fact of her life agreed with the smaller belief. She created a hair preparation for a problem she had suffered herself, called it Wonderful Hair Grower, and in 1905 she set up her business in Denver. She sold it door to door and advertised in black newspapers. By 1917, she and her company had trained 20,000 women as sales agents, going house to house across the United States and the Caribbean with tins that carried her own face on them. She became the first woman of any race in America to make herself a millionaire. But the moment worth keeping is smaller than any of that. In 1912, the National Negro Business League held its convention in Chicago. She asked to speak. She was refused. She asked again and was refused again because the men running it did not consider her business worth a place on the platform. So, on the third and final day, during a morning session, she stood up out of the audience and introduced herself to the room. "I am a woman who came from the cotton fields of the South," she said. "I was promoted from there to the wash tub. Then I was promoted to the cook kitchen, and from there I promoted myself into the business of manufacturing hair goods and preparations." And the line that has outlived everything else she said is 6 words long. "I got my start by giving myself a start." That is the whole of tonight's teaching in one sentence, spoken by somebody with more reason to believe otherwise than you or I will ever have. Nobody gave her permission. Nobody validated the belief before she acted on it. She simply stopped waiting to be told she was allowed. And every fact of her circumstances was still standing there, disagreeing with her while she did it. You do not need the permission either. It was never coming from outside, and it was never required. You are allowed to begin from exactly where you are, tonight, with nothing changed. You give yourself your own start. Nobody has to sign it. Belief 12. The old belief will argue back, and that is the sign it is leaving. This is the part that almost nobody warned you about, and it is the reason most people abandon this work in the first fortnight. Shinn warned about it plainly. Getting into the swing of this, she wrote, is no easy matter for the average person, because the adverse thoughts of doubt and fear surge up out of the deeper mind. She called them the army of the aliens, and she said they have to be put to flight. And then she explained why they show up at all, which is the useful part. Having made a statement of high truth, she said, one challenges the old beliefs in the deeper mind, and error is exposed in order to be put out. Read that carefully, because it reverses the meaning of the whole experience. You lie down tonight and let yourself feel provided for. And within a day or two, sometimes within an hour, up comes everything. The number you are behind on, the person who was right about you, the old, tired, familiar voice explaining that people like you do not get to have this, and that you have embarrassed yourself before by hoping. Almost everybody reads that as failure. Almost everybody concludes that the new belief did not take, that they are not the sort of person this works for, and that the sensible thing is to stop. Shinn read it the exact opposite way. She said a big demonstration is usually preceded by tormenting thoughts. She said this is precisely why it is so often darkest before the dawn. The old belief is not winning when it speaks up. It is being evicted, and it is objecting on the way out. Nothing that is comfortably in possession of a house bothers to shout. And her instruction for that moment is not to fight it, and it is not to analyze it either. She said, this is the time to make your statements of truth repeatedly and to rejoice and to give thanks that you have already received. Not to argue, not to win the debate, simply to keep saying the true thing while the old thing is still talking until the old thing runs out of breath, which it always does because it was only ever a habit, and habits are not brave. So if the next few nights bring up noise, you will know exactly what it is now. It is the sound of something leaving. You do not have to answer it. You only have to keep going gently. The noise is not a verdict. It is a departure. Let it go past you. Belief 13. Money answers the state you are in when you touch it. Now, we can settle the argument the two teachers seem to be having. Hill was emphatic about laying money aside. He called debt a merciless master and a fatal enemy of the saving habit. He said no man can do his best work, and no man can carry out a definite purpose in life with heavy debt hanging over his head. And he said the accumulation of debt is a habit that starts small and grows slowly until it takes charge of a person's very soul. He was not moralizing. He was describing what he had watched. He knew a man on $1,000 a month whose household was trying to make a $20,000 showing on a $12,000 income, and who was therefore permanently about $8,000 behind, and whose children could not go to college because of it. Hill's point was that the man had lost the ability to choose anything. Shinn, on the other side, said that hoarding and saving invariably lead to loss, and that the law always stands behind the one who spends fearlessly with wisdom. Look at her qualifier, fearlessly with wisdom, and look at Hill's reason, so that a man can look the world in the eye and say no. They are not describing two different policies about money. They are describing the same state from two directions, and the state is this. Money answers the condition you are in when you touch it, and there are only really two conditions available. One of them is provision. From provision, you can save, because saving is simply arranging for a future you expect to be there. From provision, you can spend, because spending is simply moving what is plentiful to where it is wanted. The other is fear. From fear, you can also save, and it will not work because you will be gripping. And from fear, you can also spend, and it will not work either because you will be soothing something. The act is identical. The state is not, and the state is the whole thing, which is why nobody can hand you a rule for this. There is no correct percentage. There is no number of months of expenses that makes a frightened person safe, because frightened is not a financial condition and it cannot be resolved with arithmetic. But provision can be practiced. It can be practiced at any balance, tonight, at the level you are currently at, and it is the only foundation that has ever made either saving or spending behave. You are provided for now, not later when a figure changes. Now. From here, you can be careful without gripping and generous without flinching. That is what you are moving into. Belief 14. Two things cause loss, and neither of them is spending. Shinn made a note that is worth more than most financial advice, and it is one line long. Two attitudes of mind cause loss: depreciation and fear of loss. Depreciation first, because it is the one nobody suspects. She had watched it happen with a woman who did not appreciate her husband and then did not have him. Her point was general. What you hold cheaply, you tend not to hold long. Not because a rule punishes you, but because a thing you have quietly decided is not much, never gets protected, never gets maintained, and never gets noticed leaving. Now put money in that sentence. Think about how ordinary it is to speak of your own income as if it were slightly embarrassing. Not much, nothing special, barely worth mentioning. Every one of those is a depreciation, and it is being said about the exact thing you are asking to have more of. Shinn's remedy was not to pretend. It was to stop the running commentary of contempt about what you already have, because the deeper mind does not distinguish between what you are dismissing and what you are asking for. They arrive at the same address. Then the second one, fear of loss, which she said makes a picture of loss. That one is more familiar. It is the mental rehearsal of the account emptying, the imagined conversation where you have to explain, the scene played through of it all going wrong. And her point is simply that a rehearsed scene is a scene you have handed over, and the deeper mind is not evaluating whether you would like it. It is only receiving a picture in feeling with your full attention on it. Proctor said the same thing and reached for the same verse Hill reached for. Behold, the thing I feared has come to visit upon me. He said that if you insist on worrying about not having enough, or on worrying about losing what you have, you are guaranteed not to worry in vain. And then he made the observation that lands hardest. His old neighbor with the boxes of money in the house was afraid that spending would make him poor, and so he lived poor for years while wealthy. The fear did not protect him from the thing. The fear delivered the thing, ahead of schedule, at full strength, and free of charge. So there are only two habits to set down: speaking small about what you have and rehearsing the loss of it. Neither of them ever kept anybody safe. Both of them can be put down tonight, and nothing in your life gets less secure when you do. What you have is good and you value it. What is coming is good too. Nothing is leaking. Nothing is at risk tonight. You can let your hands open. Belief 15. One small thing, released without flinching. Shinn taught something that sounds reckless until you understand what she was actually measuring. One of her students was out shopping with her small nephew, and the boy wanted a toy, and she told him she could not afford it. And then, standing there, she caught herself. She realized she had just spoken lack out loud and had stopped treating supply as something that was actually available to her. So she went back and bought the toy. And on the way home, she found, lying in the street, the exact amount of money she had just paid for it. Now, nobody is claiming a law of physics about pavements. What Shinn is pointing at is the mechanism she saw again and again, which is that the deeper mind reads your actions as statements about what is true, and it reads them far more reliably than it reads your words. When you release something without flinching, you have said with your hands that there is more where that came from. When you clutch, you have said the opposite, and you have said it more convincingly than any affirmation could undo. She had the other side of it too, and it is worth telling gently. A woman told her that one Thanksgiving, she had informed her family they could not afford a proper dinner. She had the money, she decided to keep it. And a few days later, that exact amount left the house another way, without her choosing it or enjoying it. Shinn's conclusion was not a threat. It was an observation about direction. If a person ignores the pull to spend or to give, she said, the same amount of money tends to go out in some uninteresting or unhappy way instead. Money that is going to move will move. The only real question is whether it moves while you are enjoying it or while you are not looking. Now, hear the boundary on this clearly, because she drew it and Proctor drew it too. This is not permission to spend money you need on things you do not want in order to prove something to the universe. That is not fearlessness. That is anxiety with a receipt. It is much smaller and much more ordinary than that. It is one thing, chosen deliberately, released without the clench, the good coffee, the proper cut of meat, the gift you are going to apologize for. The thing you always downgrade at the last second for no reason except that downgrading has become a reflex. You do that once, on purpose, and you notice that nothing collapses, and the deeper mind files that. There was enough. Nothing bad happened. Somebody in here is not afraid. That is a small deposit into the belief you actually want, and small deposits are all this has ever run on. There is enough for the small good thing. There always has been. You can enjoy what passes through your hands. Nothing has to be guarded that tightly. Belief 16, dig the ditches before there is any sign of rain. There is a passage in the Book of Kings that Shinn returned to more often than almost anything else, because it describes exactly what to do in the gap between asking and receiving. 3 kings were in the desert with no water for their men or their horses. They asked the prophet Elisha, and the answer he gave them was strange enough that it has survived 3,000 years. You shall not see wind, he said, neither shall you see rain, yet make this valley full of ditches. No wind, no rain, no cloud on the horizon, dig anyway. Shinn's whole practical teaching sits on that sentence. A person must prepare for the thing he has asked for, she said, when there is not the slightest sign of it in sight. And the ditches, she noted dryly, were filled to overflowing. She had a modern version of it that she loved, from a year when apartments in New York were almost impossible to find. A woman needed one. Her friends were sympathetic in the way that makes everything worse, telling her she would have to put her furniture in storage and live in a hotel. And she answered them, and Shinn recorded her answer word for word, that they need not feel sorry for her at all because she intended to get an apartment. Then she went and did the strangest thing. She had been thinking about buying new blankets. And the reasoning part of her mind said the obvious, sensible thing, which was do not buy blankets, because you may not get an apartment and then you will have no use for them. And she said to herself, I will dig my ditches by buying the blankets. She got the apartment. There were over 200 other applicants for it. The blankets, Shinn said, showed active faith. She saw the same thing in a woman who had no money for Christmas presents and was mourning the year before when she had plenty. Shinn told her she would never demonstrate money while she was pathetic and living in the past, and told her to get ready to give presents. So the woman went out and bought tinsel twine, seals, and wrapping paper. Shinn's line to her was, do that, and the presents will come and stick themselves to the Christmas seals. A few days before Christmas, she received a gift of several $100s and bought every present in plenty of time. And Shinn noted exactly what the reasoning mind had said to that woman while she stood in the shop with the twine in her hand. It said, keep every cent you have, because you are not sure you will get any more. Look at that sentence honestly, because it is the most reasonable sentence in the world, and it is the one that keeps people where they are. It is not stupid, it is prudent. It is the advice a careful friend would give. Shinn's name for going against it was financial fearlessness, and she meant something small by it, not recklessness, simply the willingness to make one physical arrangement for a future you cannot yet prove. So this is the practice, and it costs almost nothing. Do one small thing that only makes sense if it is already on its way. Clear the space, buy the frame before the picture, make the arrangement, write the thing down as though the date were already fixed. Not because the object has power, because the act is a statement made in the only language the deeper mind actually reads, and it is a statement you cannot make with words alone. You are getting ready. That is what a person does when something is coming. It is on its way. You can prepare for it now, quietly, tonight. Belief 17, buy the paper knife. There is one small story of Shinn's that is more useful than a whole shelf of books on this, and it is about a woman who needed a large sum of money by a stated date. She knew that thinking about it was not going to be enough, so she asked for a lead, something to do, something in the ordinary world she could act on. She was walking through a department store and she saw a beautiful pink enamel paper knife, the kind of thing used for opening letters, and she felt a pull toward it. And the thought that came with the pull was this: I have not got a paper knife good enough to open letters containing large checks. So she bought it. And Shinn is careful to say what the sensible part of the mind called that purchase, which was an extravagance. But when the woman held it in her hand, she had a flash of a picture. She saw herself opening an envelope containing a large check. Within a few weeks, she received the money. Shinn's phrase for that paper knife is the best phrase in her entire vocabulary. She called it the woman's bridge of active faith. Think about what a bridge of active faith actually is. It is a small physical object that makes a large invisible expectation feel ordinary. That is all. The knife did not summon anything. The knife made a picture available that had not been available before, and it made it available in the hand rather than in the head, which is why it worked when trying harder had not. And this is worth knowing because most people, when they want to believe something new about money, try to do it entirely inside their skull. They lie there and press. And pressing is the one method that reliably fails because effort itself is a confession that the thing is not true yet. An object skips the argument. You are not trying to convince yourself of anything. You are simply holding a good pen, or a proper wallet instead of a folded one, or a nice notebook for the figures, and the picture comes on its own. So somewhere in the next few days, There will be something small like that. It will not look spiritual. It will look like a pen or a jar or a good envelope or the drawer you finally cleared out. Take the pull seriously when it comes. It is not a shopping impulse. It is a bridge. And a bridge is only ever built in one direction, which is toward the place you have decided you are going. Something small and good is on its way to your hands. You will know it when you feel the pull. Belief 18. Do not ask for success while quietly rehearsing the failure. Shinn had a rule about this, and she stated it in one sentence. If one asks for success and prepares for failure, he will get the situation he is prepared for. She had an example that is painfully recognizable. A man came to her and asked her to speak the word that a certain debt of his would be wiped out, and she agreed, and then she looked at what he was actually doing with his days. He was spending them planning what he would say to the man when he could not pay the bill. Not planning how to pay it, planning the conversation in which he failed to, rehearsing the apology, choosing the words, anticipating the face. Shinn's verdict was that this neutralized everything else. He should have seen himself paying the debt, she said, and that is the whole correction. Now be gentle with yourself about this, because that man was not being stupid. He was being responsible in the way people are taught to be responsible. Preparing for the worst feels like maturity. It feels like the adult thing to do. It even feels like it protects you, because if you have imagined it in advance, it cannot ambush you. But look at what is actually happening in the mind during that rehearsal. Full attention, real feeling, vivid detail. Every ingredient the deeper mind requires in order to accept something as a description of reality applied for 20 minutes at a stretch to a scene you do not want. And then, later, 30 seconds of a hopeful statement made without much feeling at all, and people wonder why the 30 seconds loses. It was never a fair fight. It was one carefully felt picture against one carelessly spoken sentence. So the correction is not to try harder at the sentence. The correction is to stop feeding the other picture and to put the same detail, the same length, the same vividness into the scene you actually want. See the debt paid, not the plan for paying it, the moment after, the account settled, the letter filed, the ordinary Tuesday on the other side of it, when the whole thing has become something that used to be a problem. Give that scene the 20 minutes. That is all this is. You are preparing for the good outcome now. It is the only one you rehearse. See it done and settled. Feel how ordinary it is. That is the picture you keep. Belief 19. You will not get rich with a burnt match in the pincushion. A woman came to Shinn asking for help with prosperity, and Shinn, before doing anything else, noticed the state of the woman's house, which was in complete disorder. What she said to her is the most practical sentence in the book. If you wish to be rich, you must be orderly. All men with great wealth are orderly, and order is heaven's first law. And then, because she had a sense of humor, she added the line that nobody who reads it ever forgets. You will never become rich with a burnt match in the pincushion. The woman laughed, and then she went home and did it. She rearranged the furniture, she straightened out the drawers, she cleaned the rugs. And soon afterwards, a substantial gift arrived from a relative. But the part Shinn thought was more important is what happened to the woman herself. She was, in Shinn's words, made over. She kept herself keyed up financially from then on, watchful of the external, expecting prosperity. Now, why would tidying a drawer have anything to do with money? Not because the universe rewards housekeeping, because of what disorder is a record of. A burnt match left in a pincushion is a tiny act of not caring, preserved. It sat there because nobody thought the space was worth the 4 seconds. Multiply that by 1,000 small surrenders, and you get a house that is quietly, continuously informing its owner that this is a place where things are not looked after and standards do not apply. You cannot live inside that message all day and then expect the deeper mind to accept a different message for 10 minutes at bedtime. The house is on all the time. The house wins, and the reverse is just as true, and it is available tonight for free. A made bed is a statement. A cleared surface is a statement. A drawer where things are where they should be is a small, continuous, wordless piece of evidence that somebody competent lives here and expects good things. This is the cheapest lever in the entire philosophy. It costs no money at all. It requires no belief. You do not have to feel prosperous to straighten a shelf, and the shelf will start doing the arguing for you. So tomorrow, one surface, not the house, one surface, cleared and left clear. And notice how much larger your life feels standing next to it, which is the whole point, because larger is a state, and the state is what money answers. You keep good order, and good things come to order. Your place is cared for. Everything in your life is finding its right place tonight, quietly, while you rest. Belief 20, what you send out about money comes back wearing the same coat. Shinn had a phrase for this that is worth more than the theory around it. The game of life, she said, is a game of boomerangs. And she had one story about money that is so exact it is almost funny. A woman came to her upset because she had been given a counterfeit $20 bill at the bank, and she was certain the bank would never admit the mistake. So Shinn asked the only question she ever asked, which was, "Let us find out why you attracted this." The woman thought for a moment and then remembered. She had recently sent a friend a large amount of stage money as a joke. So the law, Shinn said, had sent her some stage money back because it does not know anything about jokes. Now, what she did next is the part people miss, and it matters more than the story. She did not tell the woman she had earned it and would have to accept it. She invoked what she called the law of forgiveness, which she said is simply the fact that a person has the power to neutralize his own mistakes. She spoke the word that the woman was under grace and could not lose the $20 that was rightfully hers. Then she told her something very practical. Go back to the bank and tell them fearlessly that it was given to you there by mistake. The woman did. They apologized, gave her another bill, and treated her, in Shinn's words, most courteously. There are two teachings in that, and both of them are useful tonight. The first is that the deeper mind is completely literal and has no sense of proportion or humor. It does not grade your intent. A joke about fake money and a genuine fear about real money are filed in the same drawer because both were felt and both concerned money. The second is much kinder, and it is the one to sleep on. Nothing that has been set in motion by an old belief is permanent. Shinn's entire point about forgiveness is that a person has power to rub out his own mistakes, not to be punished for the decades before tonight, not to serve a sentence for every careless thing said about money since childhood. The account is not a ledger of debts owed by you. It never was. It is a mechanism, and it responds to the state you are in now, which is the only state it can read. So nothing has to be paid off before you are allowed to start. There is nothing on your record. You are under grace here. You start clean tonight. Everything before this is simply information. Belief 21. Money was made to move, and one man proved it on a plank across two barrels. In April of 1906, the city of San Francisco was destroyed by an earthquake and the fire that followed it. The banks that survived kept their doors shut, because that is the sensible thing for a bank to do when a city has burned down and nobody can prove who they are. A man named Amedeo Peter Giannini had a small bank in the Italian neighborhood of North Beach. He did not wait. He set up on a wharf, using two barrels with a plank of wood laid across them for a desk, and he opened for business while the ash was still falling. Almost everybody who came to him had lost everything, including any paper that proved who they were or what they had owned. So he lent on signatures and on handshakes to working people, on nothing but his own reading of the man in front of him. Every one of those loans, by the accounts that survive, was repaid in full. That bank became Bank of America. Now, here is the part of Giannini that belongs in a video about money beliefs, because it is stranger than the earthquake. For years, he took virtually no pay. When his board once surprised him with a bonus of $1.5 million, he gave the entire amount away to the University of California. And when he died in 1949, having built what was for a time the largest bank in the world, his estate came to $489,000. Not because anything went wrong, because he never wanted to be a rich man. He believed that a great fortune would put distance between him and the people he had built the thing for, and he arranged his life so that it never happened. Sit with that for a moment because it dismantles two beliefs at once. It dismantles the belief that money only goes to people who grab, since he built the largest bank in the world by lending to people with no collateral in the worst week of their lives. And it dismantles the belief that wanting money and being a good person are in tension, because here is a man who moved enormous amounts of it, generated enormous amounts of it, and never once needed to sit on it. That is what Proctor meant about money being a servant. Giannini never argued with money and never worshipped it. He just kept it moving through the hands that needed it, and it kept coming back to him in quantities he had no personal use for. Money is not a pond. It has never been a pond. It is a current, and a current has to be somewhere on its way to something. Money moves through you and on to where it is needed, and more comes behind it. You are part of the current now. It flows easily in your direction. Belief 22, the bigger shovel. Robert Gilmore Letourneau left school after the 7th grade. He taught himself engineering out of books and out of work, and by the end of his life, he held 299 patents and had built the largest earth-moving machines in the world. His equipment moved the ground for the American highway system and for the Allied advance in the Second World War. None of that is the reason he belongs in this list. At 30 years old, he was deeply in debt. And at 30, in that condition, he made a decision about money that almost nobody makes and that most people would call financially insane. He decided to give away 90% of his income and keep 10, not 10% to charity and 90 to himself. The other way around, and he did it for the rest of his life through the growth of a manufacturing empire on sums that got very large indeed. He used to quote a friend of his on the subject, and the line is the best summary of circulation anyone has ever managed. God shovels it out, he said, and I shovel it back. But God has a bigger shovel. Now, this is not being told to you as an instruction. Nobody is suggesting you give away 90% of anything tonight, and it would be dishonest to pretend that is the lesson. The lesson is in the timing. He did not make that decision after he was rich. He made it while he was in debt. The giving was not a consequence of having plenty. The giving was the thing he did while he did not have plenty, and everything else came afterwards. That order is the whole point, and it is the order almost everybody gets backwards. Most people are waiting to be generous. Most people have a figure in mind, above which they will finally be the sort of person who gives easily, and the figure moves. It has moved every time anybody has reached it, because generosity was never a function of the balance. It is a state, and states do not arrive when conditions improve. They arrive when you decide. So the question for tonight is very small. Not how much, just whether the flow through your hands is currently a one-way flow. Because a hand that only ever closes has to close on the way in as well. It is the same hand. It cannot be open in one direction and shut in the other. And a hand that is trained to shut will shut on the opportunity, on the offer, on the ask, on the price you should have named. Openness is a single setting. That is why the giving works. It is not a payment. It is a way of keeping the hand from learning to grip. You give easily and receive easily. It is one motion. There is always enough for you and enough to pass on. That is simply how it works now. Belief 23, your word is your wand. Shinn had a phrase for the spoken word that became the title of one of her books. Your word is your wand. She was not being decorative. She had spent years watching people write their own conditions out loud without any idea they were doing it. And she said that a person who understands the power of the word becomes very careful of his conversation. He has only to watch the reaction of his words, she said, to know that they do not return empty. Now, this is the point in a video like this where somebody usually starts telling you to police every sentence you speak. And that instruction has never helped anybody because it turns your own mouth into something to be afraid of. So let us take it the useful way round. Shinn's actual observation was not that stray words are dangerous. It was that repeated words are instructions. The man who said he always missed the streetcar did not say it once. He said it for years, with feeling as a summary of who he was. And the money version of that sentence is the most common sentence in the language. I can't afford it. Consider what that sentence actually does. said out loud, in a shop, in front of a child, several times a week for 20 years. It is not a fact about a price. It is a statement about a person, and the person it is about is you, and the deeper mind is listening to every one of them without evaluating any of them. Shinn's replacement was never a lie. She never told anybody to stand in a shop claiming to be rich. Her instruction was to change the address of the sentence. I am not spending money on that today is a fact. I choose not to is a fact. Neither of them says anything at all about your capacity, and both of them are completely honest, and after a few months of them, something has quietly changed in the room where beliefs are stored. That is all this is. It is not magic, and it is not self-deception. It is simply noticing that you have been narrating your own life in the third person for years, and that the narration was being taken as a brief. She had one more piece of it, and it is the kindest part. She said that a person has the power to neutralize what he has said, which means none of the old sentences are load-bearing. You do not have to go back and undo 20 years of them. You only have to stop laying new ones. The words you speak about money are true and generous now, starting with the ones you say to yourself. You speak well of your life. It answers you well. Belief 24. Wonderful service, wonderful pay. Shinn gave one of her students 2 lines to say, and the student added 2 more, and the 4 together became the most successful thing she ever wrote. I have a wonderful work, in a wonderful way. I give wonderful service, for wonderful pay. She said the rhyme was the reason it worked so well, because a rhyme sinks easily into the deeper mind. The student went about singing it aloud, and got exactly that. Wonderful work, in a wonderful way, wonderful service, wonderful pay. A businessman in her class took it and changed one word, saying business where she had said work. He had had no activity in his affairs for months. That afternoon, he closed a deal worth $41,000. But the reason this belief has its own place tonight is not the rhyme. It is the story Shinn told immediately afterwards, because it is the most useful warning in her whole book. She knew a woman in real need who made a demand for work, and she received a great deal of work, and she was never paid anything for any of it. Shinn's note on this is 1 line. She now knows to add, wonderful service for wonderful pay. Every affirmation, she said, must be carefully worded and completely cover the ground. Sit with how exact that is, because it explains something that happens to a great many hard-working people who cannot understand why the effort never converts. They asked for work. They got work. They asked to be useful. They became useful. They asked for opportunity. An opportunity arrived. An opportunity is not the same thing as payment, and never has been. The deeper mind is not stingy in these situations. It is obedient. It filled the order exactly as written, and the order did not mention money. So this is the correction, and it is worth making tonight while you are relaxed enough not to argue with it. Ask for the whole thing, the work and the pay, the service and the return. Not because you are grasping, but because a request with the money left out of it is an incomplete request, and it will be filled incompletely with perfect accuracy. And if you find, as many good people do, that you can comfortably ask to be useful, but feel uneasy asking to be paid well for it, notice that. That is not humility. That is the belief showing itself again. And it is the exact belief this hour is for. If any of tonight has landed on you, and you would like more of these evenings, subscribe, and the next one will find you on its own. You give wonderful service and you receive wonderful pay, both halves, fully. Your work is valued and it is paid well. That is the ordinary arrangement now. Belief 25. Ask in a way that cannot take anything from anyone. Shinn was more careful about the wording of a request than any teacher of her generation, and she was careful because she had seen requests come true badly. She knew a woman who demanded $1,000. Her daughter was injured and the family received $1,000 in compensation. Shinn's comment is not that the woman caused the accident. It is quieter and more precise than that. It did not come in a perfect way, she said, and she rewrote the request so that it could not have. Her form was this: I give thanks that the money which is mine by divine right is now released and reaches me under grace in a perfect way. That last clause is the whole safeguard, and it is why she taught it to everybody. It closes the door on any route that would take from anyone. She had a harder case that she recorded honestly, and it is the most sobering paragraph in her book. A woman with a very strong will wanted a house that belonged to somebody she knew. She pictured herself living in it repeatedly for a long time. In the course of time, the owner died and she moved in. Years later, having learned something about how this works, she asked Shinn whether she had had anything to do with the man's death, and Shinn did not comfort her with a vague answer. She said that the desire had been so strong that everything made way for it. And then she pointed out what it had cost, because the woman's own husband, whom she loved, died soon afterwards, and the house was a burden on her hands for years. What the woman should have said, Shinn wrote, was this: "Give me the right house, equally as charming as this one, the house which is mine by right." Now, that story can frighten people, and it should not. It is not there to make you afraid of wanting things. It is there to make one distinction, and the distinction is freeing rather than restricting. There is a difference between wanting a thing and wanting that particular thing out of that particular person's hands. The first is fine. The first is how everything gets built. The second narrows the whole supply of the world down to one channel, and it puts you in the position of needing a specific person's loss. You never have to be in that position, not once. Whatever you saw and wanted, the thing you actually wanted was never the object. It was the feeling of the object, and that feeling is manufactured in enormous quantities and delivered by routes nobody can predict. So ask for the thing and leave the route open. It will come by a road that costs nobody anything. What is yours comes to you by the right road in a good way, taking nothing from anyone. You do not have to compete for it. It has your name on it. Belief 26. Name what you want, not what you want to escape. Shinn was asked once by a woman why she was constantly losing or breaking her glasses. They looked into it, and they found that the woman had a habit of saying, with real vexation, that she wished she could get rid of her glasses. Shinn's summary is one of her sharpest lines. Her impatient desire was violently fulfilled. What the woman actually wanted was perfect eyesight. What she had registered over and over in feeling was the desire to be rid of the glasses. So the glasses kept being got rid of, which is precisely what she had asked for, delivered exactly as ordered. Man's dreary desires, Shinn wrote, are answered drearily, and his impatient desires are long delayed or violently fulfilled. Now put money in that story, because this is where almost everybody is standing. Listen to the request that most people actually make in feeling several times a day. I need to get out of debt. I need this to stop. I cannot keep doing this. I just want to not have to worry about money. Every one of those is a request about the thing you do not want. Every one of those has the unwanted thing at the center of it, being felt, being attended to, being made vivid. And the deeper mind, which does not evaluate and does not editorialize, receives a clear and detailed picture of debt, of worry, and of the state of needing it to stop. There is nothing in that request describing what you do want. There is not one figure in it. There is not one ordinary afternoon in it. So the correction tonight is a change of subject, and it is a small one. Not I want out of this. Instead, the plain positive statement of the condition itself. I am provided for. My bills are paid easily. There is more than enough coming in, and it comes in regularly, and I am at ease about it. Shinn had her own wording for it, and she wrote it out for her students to use, and it is worth having because every word in it is doing a job. God is my unfailing supply, and large sums of money come to me quickly, under grace, in perfect ways. Unfailing, so there is no scarcity in it. Large sums, so it is not modest. Quickly, so it is not deferred to a vague someday. Under grace, so nothing is taken from anyone. In perfect ways, so no route has to be forced. There is not one negative word in that sentence, and not one mention of anything she was trying to escape. Notice that not one of those mentions the problem. Notice that you could say all four of them without the old situation appearing anywhere in your mind. That is the difference between escaping something and choosing something, and the deeper mind can only ever act on the second one, because escape is not a destination and it cannot be pictured. You are not getting away from anything. You are going somewhere. You are provided for and at ease. Your bills are paid easily, and there is plenty left over. Belief 27. Bless the person who makes you feel poor. Shinn described a woman who needed money and understood the laws perfectly well, and who kept being thrown in the course of business, together with a man who made her feel poor. He talked lack, he talked limitation, and Shinn's phrase for what happened next is the exact experience half the people listening will recognize. She commenced to catch his poverty thoughts, caught like a cold. So she disliked him and blamed him for her own failure. And the more she resisted him, the more solidly he stayed in her life, because she was giving the situation all of her attention and all of her feeling. Then one day, she saw what she was doing, and she did something that sounds absurd until you understand it. She blessed the man. She said, "Since there is only one power, this man is here for my good and for my prosperity," which was very obviously not what he was there for. Soon after that, she met, through him, a woman who paid her several $1,000s for a service, and the man moved to a distant city and faded out of her life without any unpleasantness at all. Shinn's general instruction from this was to say of everyone that every man is a golden link in the chain of my good. And she had a blunter version too. "Bless your enemy," she said, "and you rob him of his ammunition." Now, Hill described the same phenomenon from the practical end, without any of the spiritual vocabulary, and it is worth hearing both. He said that one pessimist, if permitted to continue long enough, can destroy the work of half a dozen competent men, and that he does it by setting the thought of poverty and failure adrift in the minds of the people around him. And Hill knew a banker in Illinois who had solved it with a sign on his own office wall, which read, "We talk and think only of abundance here. If you have a tale of woe, please keep it, as we do not want it." There is a whole policy in that sign, and it is not unkind. It does not say the man was unwelcome. It says the tale was. So the practice tonight is not to cut anybody out of your life. It is much smaller and much more possible. When somebody starts talking money down, you do not have to catch it. You can let the sentence pass through the room without taking it in, and you can privately say something good about them while it does. That costs you nothing, it changes nothing about them, and it keeps the inside of your own mind clear, which was the only thing you were ever actually responsible for. You are unaffected by other people's fear about money. It goes past you. You wish everyone well, and you keep your own weather. Belief 28. Your ships come in over a calm sea. There is a small, very human story that Shinn told about herself, and it is one of the few times she recorded her own mistake. She was waiting for an important telephone call, and because she wanted it so badly, she began managing the situation. She resisted every other call that came in. She made no calls out. She reasoned, quite logically, that any other call might interfere with the one she was waiting for. She stayed tense and anxious for about an hour, watching the telephone. Then she looked at it properly and discovered that the receiver had been off the whole time, and the line had been disconnected for the entire hour. Her own summary of it is unsparing. "My anxiety, my fear, and my belief in interference," she wrote, "had brought on a total eclipse of the telephone." So she stopped managing. She blessed the situation and said that she could not lose any call that belonged to her by right. A friend ran out to the nearest telephone to report the fault. She walked into a crowded grocery, and the owner left his customers standing there and dealt with the call himself. The line was reconnected at once. 2 minutes later, Shinn received a very important call, and about an hour after that, the one she had been waiting for. And then she wrote the sentence that this whole belief is named after. One's ships come in over a calm sea. That is the piece to keep tonight, because there is a particular kind of exhausted person this is written for, and it may be you. You have been working on this. You have been holding the picture, checking the picture, monitoring the picture, watching your own mind for slippage, and then worrying about the worrying. And the whole apparatus has become a second job, and the second job has no pay and no end. That effort is not the price of admission. That effort is the interference. Shinn's phrase for what she had done was that she made the battle hers instead of leaving it. And the reason that fails is not that the universe objects to being helped. It is that vigilance and expectation cannot occupy the same mind. Vigilance is what you do when you think something might not arrive. So this is permission, and it is real permission, and it applies for the rest of tonight at minimum. You can stop watching the line. You can put the whole thing down for the next several hours, and nothing that belongs to you will be lost while you are not supervising it. The sea gets calm the moment you stop making waves in it to check that it still works. Nothing that belongs to you can be lost. You can stop watching for it. Let it be still. It is all being arranged while you rest. Belief 29. It has never once been too late. Somewhere in almost everybody's money belief, there is a clock in it, a quiet sense that there was a window, that other people got into it, and that yours has mostly closed. So here are two men whose lives make that belief simply untrue as a matter of record. In 1952, a man of 62 sold the first franchise of his chicken recipe to a restaurant owner named Pete Harmon in Salt Lake City. He had spent his working life doing a great many other things, most of them unremarkable, several of them failures. He was 62 years old with a recipe and a pressure cooker, and the thing he built from that point became one of the most recognized names on earth. His name was Harlan Sanders. 2 years later, in 1954, a 52-year-old salesman was traveling around the United States, selling milkshake mixers and struggling to do it. He noticed that one small restaurant in San Bernardino had ordered 8 of his machines, which made no sense. So he went to look at it. The brothers running it were called Dick and Mac McDonald. The salesman was Ray Kroc, and he was 52, tired, and selling appliances out of the back of a car. Now, notice what these two stories are not. They are not stories about late blooming talent. Neither man discovered a gift at 60. Sanders had been cooking that chicken for years, and Kroc had been selling for decades. Nothing new appeared in either man. What changed was that each of them stopped treating his own age as evidence. That is the entire difference, and it is the only difference. At 62, a man who believes it is too late has a recipe and a closed window. A man who does not believe it has a recipe and an open one, and the recipe is identical in both hands. Shinn had a line for this that fits both of them. Living in the past, she said, is a failure method. And she said the robbers of time are the past and the future, and that a person should live fully in the now. The clock in your money belief is not measuring anything. It was installed by comparison, not by observation, and it has never once been consulted by the world outside your head. Nobody arriving with an opportunity checks your age first. Money has no idea how old you are. So, whatever number you are, that number is not a factor in this. It has not been a factor for anybody who ever tested it, and a great many people have tested it at every age, in every decade, and the result comes back the same every time. You are exactly the right age. Nothing has been missed and nothing has closed. There is time. There is more time than you were told. Belief 30. You do not need a large sum to start anything. In September of 1963, a 45-year-old woman in Dallas started a company with $5,000 of her own savings and the help of her 20-year-old son. Her name was Mary Kay Ash. The company still carries her name. $5,000 was not a fortune in 1963, and it was not a fortune to her. It was her life savings, which is a different thing from capital. It was every spare dollar a middle-aged woman had managed to keep, put into a room, and a stock of product and a bet. And this is where a very stubborn money belief usually lives, and it is worth naming precisely because it disguises itself as realism. The belief is that the amount you currently have is not enough to be the beginning of anything, and therefore the sensible thing is to wait until it is. Nobody has ever reached that amount, not once in the whole history of anybody waiting for it. Because the amount is not a number, it is a feeling, and the feeling recalculates itself upward the moment you get near it. A person waiting to feel financially ready is not waiting for money. They are waiting for a state, and the state is available now, and only now. Shinn had watched this and said the useful thing about it. It is impossible, she wrote, for a person to release more than he thinks is possible. And Proctor made the same observation about starting, which is that people confuse the size of the resource with the size of the idea, and the two have almost nothing to do with each other. Look at the actual arithmetic of the people in tonight's stories. $600 borrowed from relatives, $5,000 of savings, a plank across 2 barrels, a pressure cooker, 2 lines of a rhyme. Not one of them started with what a reasonable person would call enough. And there is a mercy hidden in that which is worth taking to sleep with you. If large beginnings were required, then your current position would matter enormously, and you would be right to despair about it. But they are not required, and they never have been, which means your current position is not a verdict. It is simply the place where the next thing starts, and the next thing does not care how much is in the account on the night it begins. What you have is enough to begin with. It always was. You are ready now, not when a number changes, now. Belief 31. The 6th attempt is no further from the money than the first. In 1876, a 19-year-old borrowed $600 from relatives and opened a candy shop in Philadelphia. He sold penny sweets, ice cream, caramels, dried fruit, and nuts. The competition was fierce. His customers bought on credit, and his suppliers wanted paying up front. He kept it alive for 6 years, and then it closed in bankruptcy. So he went to Denver and worked at the trade there. And while he was there, he learned something worth knowing, which was how to make caramel with fresh milk. Then he went to Chicago, then to New Orleans. Then, deciding that the problem must be location, he went to New York and took a job at a candy store called Hyler's, where he learned about using fresh cream. He tried again in New York. That failed too. In 1886, he went back to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and a bank cashier named William Lebkitcher, who had tasted his milk caramels and understood what he was holding, backed him. The Lancaster Caramel Company was the beginning of everything, and the man's name was Milton Hershey, and there is a town in Pennsylvania named after him now. Count the years in that. 19 years old in Philadelphia, 29 in Lancaster, a decade of failing in 4 different cities. And notice what he was doing in every one of those cities, because this is the part that matters. He was not repeating himself. Denver taught him fresh milk. New York taught him fresh cream. The 2 things he learned while failing are precisely the 2 things that made the caramels good enough to attract the only backer he ever needed. He was not further from the money on the 5th attempt than the first. He was much closer, and every attempt was the reason. This is where a money belief does its most expensive work, because the belief does not say you cannot succeed. The belief says that the number of times you have already tried is evidence against you, and so every attempt makes the next one heavier, when in reality, every attempt makes the next one better. Proctor was firm about this. The past, he said, is the place where all life ends, and it is also the place where most people spend most of their time. And he said that all the great achievers were people who thought about what could be, not what already was. Nothing that has not worked yet is a measurement of you. It is training, and it has already been paid for. Everything you have tried has taught you something you are about to use. You are closer than you have ever been. All of it counted. Belief 32. A collapse is not a verdict. The financial panic of 1873 came for a great many businesses, and one of the ones it came for belonged to a young man in Pittsburgh who had been selling horseradish. There was too much horseradish, and there was no money in the country, and in 1875, the company went bankrupt. He did not take it well. By December of that year, he was bedridden with depression, and there were days when he could not get out of bed at all. That detail matters, because it means he was not one of those people who bounce. On New Year's Day of 1876, his family sat down together. He explained the state he was in, and he put a proposal to them. His brother John came in, his cousin Frederick came in. his wife Sarah came in. They founded a new company, and that same year, it introduced a product made from tomatoes, and the man's name was Henry John Hines. And he did one more thing, which is the reason he is in tonight's list rather than a business book. The debts of the old bankrupt firm were legally gone. He vowed to repay every one of them anyway, and it took him 5 years. Now here is what that story dismantles. It does not dismantle the belief that money can be lost, because money can be lost and his was. It dismantles something more specific and more damaging, which is the belief that a collapse tells you something true about your capacity. 6 days. That is the gap between a man who cannot get out of bed and a man sitting at a table on New Year's Day making a proposal to his family. The collapse said nothing about him at all. It said something about horseradish and the year 1873. Shinn's line about this is short. She said that a person can only be what he sees himself to be and can only attain what he sees himself attaining. And Hill, who lost his own fortune in 1929 and rebuilt from the floor, said that no man is ever whipped until he quits in his own mind. Whatever happened to you financially, at whatever point, was an event. It was weather. It happened in a year, in a market, in a set of circumstances that have since changed. It was never a report on what you are capable of, and it did not have the authority to be. What happened to you was weather. It was never a verdict. You are not defined by any year. That is behind you, and it stays behind you. Belief 33. The bill you cannot pay tonight says nothing at all about you. In 1992, a young man in Atlanta scraped together $12,000 from a series of jobs, including working as a bill collector and selling used cars, and put the whole of it into staging a play he had written. 30 people came over the entire weekend. He was nearly broke and discouraged, and he did the thing that looks like foolishness at the time. He kept putting it on in Atlanta and then in smaller cities around the Southeast, and every time he took time off to rehearse and stage it, he lost the job he was living on. From 1992 until 1998, every single show he put on flopped. He ran out of savings. He was homeless on and off for 6 years, sleeping in his car and in hotels paid for by the week. That is not a difficult patch. That is most of a decade. What kept him going was small, and it came from the audience. The people who did come told him what the play had done for them. In 1998, the same play, on tour, sold out in Washington, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Miami. The man was Tyler Perry, and there is a film studio in Atlanta with his name on it now. Now, the reason this belongs here, and the reason it belongs at this hour, is not the ending. The ending is the least useful part of it. The useful part is the 6 years, and specifically what those 6 years were saying to him at the time, night after night in the car. They were saying the thing your worst nights say to you, that the evidence is in, that a person to whom money comes would not be here. That the sensible reading of the situation is that you are simply not one of the people this works for. And the evidence was in. That is the honest part. Every fact available to him in 1996 supported the smaller conclusion, and anybody looking at his life from outside would have advised him to stop, and they would have been reasoning correctly from the information they had. The information was just not the whole information. It never is, in the middle of something. There is no financial condition at any point on any night that carries information about your future. A balance is a photograph of one moment. It has no predictive power whatsoever, and it never claimed any. The despair is what supplies the prediction, and the despair is not an analyst. So whatever the number is tonight, it is a number. It is not a sentence, and it is not about you. Nothing about tonight's figure describes your life. It is one photograph. You are on your way. This part is simply the part before. Belief 34, money will not make you someone else. From 1982 to 1988, the richest man in the United States drove a 1,979 Ford pickup, not as a stunt and not for a photograph. He drove it from store to store every day, and he went on driving that same truck until he died in 1992. It is in a museum in Bentonville, Arkansas now, in the condition he left it in. He had lived in the same house in that town since 1959 with his wife Helen, and he queued at the till in his own shops like everybody else. Somebody eventually asked him the obvious question, which is why a man who could drive anything on earth drove a pickup, and Sam Walton's answer has outlived most of what he built. "I just don't believe a big showy lifestyle is appropriate," he said. "Why do I drive a pickup truck? What am I supposed to haul my dogs around in? A Rolls Royce?" Now, this is here for one specific fear, and it is a fear that a lot of decent people carry without ever saying it out loud, because saying it out loud sounds ridiculous. The fear is that money would make you into somebody you would not like, that you would become one of those people, that you would get hard or showy or thin, that the version of you with plenty would look down on the version of you who is listening to this tonight, and that something honest in you would be lost in the trade. That fear is doing an enormous amount of quiet work. It is not an idle thought. It is a live objection, and a mind with a live objection to an outcome will not deliver that outcome, however many affirmations get layered on top of it, because the deeper mind will always protect you from something you have decided is dangerous. So look at the man in the truck. The money did not make him showy because he was not showy. It bought him more of what he actually valued, which was a town he liked, a wife he had been married to for decades, dogs, and a job he wanted to keep doing until he died. That is all it does. Proctor said money is a servant, and a servant does not choose the household's character. It amplifies it. Whatever you are, you will be more of it, out loud, at greater volume, with more reach. And you already know what you are. You have been generous when it cost you something. You have been careful when nobody was watching. That is the material this would be amplifying. You would still be you, with more room in it. You stay exactly yourself. Plenty only gives you more of what you already love. Belief 35. Nothing behind you is setting the price of what comes next. Proctor had a chapter he called Don't Think in Reverse, and he opened it with the plainest image in the book. You will never gain any substantial measure of wealth, he said, if you insist on living your life as though you were looking back through the rear view mirror of your car. And he named where most of that backward looking actually comes from, which is not money at all. It comes from school. During the formative years of our lives, he wrote, we are taught that our results at school will determine whether we win or lose in life. And that idea gets fired at us from every angle until we do not merely believe it intellectually, we become emotionally involved with it. Then he named what it costs, and he did not soften it. The lives of untold numbers of people, he said, have been needlessly sacrificed on the altar of failure. That is worth stopping on, because a very large number of people are carrying a financial ceiling that was set by a report card in a subject they no longer remember, marked by somebody who has since forgotten their name. He backed it with an older voice. William James, one of the first great psychologists, concluded before the turn of the last century that the average person uses only a small fraction of what they have. Most people, he wrote, live in a very restricted circle of their potential being, making use of a very small portion of their possible consciousness, much like a person who, out of their whole body, gets into the habit of using and moving only their little finger. Only the little finger, a whole instrument, and one small habitual motion. Proctor's practical point was that you may have been telling yourself for so long that you cannot do certain things that you have manufactured an actual block in your own conscious mind. And his fix was gentler than you would expect from him. Get into a very relaxed state, he said, and become consciously aware that you can do the things you want to do and that you probably just do not yet know how. Notice the difference between those two sentences. I cannot do it is a statement about you. I do not yet know how is a statement about information, and information arrives constantly, without permission, throughout an entire life. Nothing in your history has any authority over the next 10 years. It was not a test and there was no result. You are far more capable than the record shows. The record was never measuring this. Tonight you can set it all down. None of it is coming with you. Belief 36. Everything you say about money is a note addressed to yourself. Proctor had very little patience with one particular phrase, and he had none because he had watched what it does to the people who say it. The phrase is, money isn't important. His answer was practical rather than philosophical. The people who say that might not care about money, he said, but their car dealer cares about it, their grocer cares about it, and so does whoever holds their mortgage. And then he made the point that closes the argument. Nothing can take the place of money in the arena in which money is used. To claim it is unimportant is simply not true. Notice that he was not making a case for greed. He said, in the same breath, always love people and use money, and never the other way round. And he said he had watched people of high intelligence reverse it to their own great cost. What he was objecting to was a pose, and the pose is expensive. Because think about what you are instructing when you say money is not important. You are telling the part of you that arranges your life in plain language that this thing is not a priority and not worth attention. And then you are surprised when it is not prioritized. The same goes for what you say about other people who have it. He was direct about this one too. Whenever a group gathers to talk about somebody who has done well, he said, there is always one person who explains that they were just lucky or just in the right place at the right time. Now, listen to that sentence the way the deeper mind hears it, because the deeper mind does not know the difference between a person you are describing and a person you are. The sentence says, money comes from luck. It says, money is a thing that happens to people who happen to be somewhere. It says nothing whatsoever about anything that could be done deliberately by someone listening. Say that about strangers for 30 years, and you have written yourself a very clear instruction about how money works and how little you can do about it. Proctor's correction was small. He said that luck plays a part, but it is never sufficient in itself, and money is always earned in one way or another. So the accurate version, spoken about anybody who has done well, is that they must have done something, and it probably took them longer than it looks. That sentence costs you nothing to say. It is also almost certainly true. And every time you say it, you have quietly told yourself that this is a thing people do on purpose, and that you are people. Money matters to you, and you say so plainly. There is nothing shameful in that. You speak well of everyone who has done well. It is a door you are keeping open. Belief 37, it comes through you, not to you. There is a phrase Shinn used that changes the whole geometry of this, and it is easy to miss because it is only 3 words different from the way everybody thinks. Speaking of health, love, supply, self-expression, and home, she said that they are all finished and complete already, and that they must come through a person, not to him. Not to, through. That distinction does an enormous amount of work, and it clears up the single most common frustration people have with this material. If money comes to you, then you are a destination, and a destination waits. A destination watches the road. A destination checks whether anything is arriving yet, and gets discouraged when it is not, and starts to wonder whether it has been forgotten. If money comes through you, then you are not a destination at all. You are a channel, and a channel does not wait for anything. A channel simply needs to be open, and openness is something you can actually attend to tonight, whereas arrival is not. Look at what the word explains. It explains why the woman who bought the blankets got the apartment, because she made herself the kind of person the thing could pass through. It explains why the man in the fur coat got the commission, because his own sense of himself widened enough for the money to fit. It explains Giannini, who moved unimaginable sums and kept almost none, and who was never once short. And it explains something gentler about your own life. You have probably had money pass through you in quantities that would have astonished you at 20. It arrived and it went out again, on rent and food and other people's needs. And because you were treating yourself as a destination, you never counted any of it as evidence. But it was evidence. It came through. The channel works. It has always worked, at every level you have ever occupied. So the practical question stops being when will it come, which nobody can answer, and becomes something you can actually do something about. Am I open? Is there a clench anywhere in this? Is there a place where I am gripping on the way in or gripping on the way out? That is a question with an answer. And the answer is available lying down tonight with no information about the future required. Money passes through your life freely. You are open at both ends. You are not waiting for it. It is already moving. Belief 38. You are not required to know how. A man came to Shinn who had to raise $50,000 for his business inside a fixed time, and the time was almost up. Nobody would invest. The bank had refused him flatly, and he came to her in despair. She told him to go back to the bank. He told her that was impossible. Tomorrow was Saturday. The bank closed at 12. His train would not get him there until 10. The deadline was that day, and in any case, they had already said no. Her answer was not a plan. She said that she did not know anything about business, but she knew all about how this works, and that nothing here needs time, and nothing here is ever too late. He said that it all sounded fine sitting in her room and terrible the moment he walked out, which is the most honest sentence anybody says about this. A week later, he wrote to her. He had raised the money. When she saw him afterwards, she asked what had actually happened and assumed he must have had more time than he thought. He said no. His train was late. He arrived at 15 minutes to 12. He walked into the bank quietly and said, "I have come for the loan." They gave it to him without a question. Now, there is a detail in that story Shinn thought was the most important part, and it was not the loan. She said that man could never have done it alone, and that he needed somebody else to hold the picture for him, because a person gets too close to his own affairs and becomes doubtful. And she quoted a line she had heard from an observer of life. No man can fail if some one person sees him successful. That is worth carrying for two reasons. The first is that not knowing how is not a defect in your position. He had no route. He had a closed bank, a late train, and 15 minutes, and the route was not required because acceptance of the end, as Goddard put it, wills the means to that end. You are not being asked to supply the how. You have never been asked for that. Shinn had a smaller case that makes the same point almost comically. A student of hers needed $100 by the following day for a debt that mattered. That evening, the woman telephoned her. The thought had come to her, for no reason, to go and look through some papers in her safe deposit box at the bank. At the bottom of the box was a new $100 bill. She was astounded, because she had been through those papers many times and knew she had never put it there. Whatever you make of that story, notice what it is not. It is not a route anybody could have planned. Nobody sits down and strategizes about the bottom of their own box. The second is more human. If you cannot hold the picture steadily by yourself right now, that is not a failure of faith. It is ordinary. Shinn thought it was so ordinary that she built her practice on it, and she said that a person should not hesitate to ask for help if he feels himself wavering. Tonight, let this be the voice holding it for you. You do not have to be the one who is certain. You only have to be the one who lets it be true for the next few hours. You do not have to know how. It is not your department. The way is being made while you sleep. You will simply be told where to walk. Belief 39. Success is not a place you arrive at. It is a place you already know you are standing. Proctor recorded an interview he had come across in which a wealthy elderly man was asked by a newspaper reporter at what point in his life he had become successful. The man's answer was this: I was successful when I was sleeping on a park bench because I knew where I was and I knew where I was going. Read that twice, because it is not modesty and it is not a paradox. He is making a technical claim about what success actually consists of. It consists of two pieces of knowledge held at the same time: where you are accurately with no flinching, and where you are going definitely with no vagueness. That is all. And notice that both of those were fully available to a man on a bench at night with nothing. Neither of them costs money. Neither of them requires anyone's agreement. Neither of them can be taken from you by a bad year. And notice which of the two people usually get wrong. It is not the second one. Most people have some sense of where they would like to end up. It is the first one, because knowing exactly where you are means looking at the real figures without shame. And shame is what makes people avoid the statement, avoid the drawer, avoid the total. But there is nothing dangerous in an accurate number, A number cannot hurt you. Only the story about the number can do that, and the story is optional. So this is the quiet, unglamorous foundation underneath everything else tonight, and it can be built tomorrow in 20 minutes. Know where you are. Write the true figures down without any commentary attached to them. No adjectives, just amounts. And know where you are going. One clear figure and what it is for. Proctor had one line for the gap between those two things, and it belongs beside the man on the bench. The truth, he said, is not always in the appearance of things. The appearance of that man was a bench. The truth of him was a route already fixed, and the bench had no authority over it whatsoever. Hold those two together and something changes in your posture that has nothing to do with your balance. You stop being a person in trouble and become a person in transit. And those are two completely different states, even when the bank statements are identical. The man on the bench was not pretending. He genuinely was successful, by the only definition that has ever produced anything, and he had been for some time before the world caught up with it. You know where you are, and you know where you are going. That is enough. Nothing about tonight is uncertain in you. The rest is only timing. Belief 40. Make room for it. There is a practice in every one of these teachers, and it is the most physical thing in the whole philosophy. Shinn taught that you have to create a vacuum for what you want, and she meant it literally. Clear the space. Get rid of what is not wanted. Make the room that the thing is going to occupy. One of her students did exactly that. Cleared out room for something new, and Shinn recorded that the telephone rang within minutes. Proctor gave a whole chapter to the same law, and both of them were pointing at something that goes beyond tidiness. Look at what an empty space actually is. It is a bet made in the physical world that something is coming. A cleared drawer is a statement. An emptied shelf is a statement. A wardrobe with room in it says, in a language older than words, that this person expects more than they currently have. And a house with no room in it says the opposite, all day, every day, without ever raising its voice. Now, this connects to something that will already have occurred to you, which is that most of us keep things because we are afraid we will not be able to replace them. That is the whole mechanism, not sentiment. Fear of the gap between letting go and receiving. Which means the cluttered cupboard and the clenched hand are the same gesture, made in different materials. So the practice for tomorrow is small, and it is not a project. One thing goes, not a house clearance. One thing that you have kept only in case that you do not like, that you have been storing against a version of the future where you cannot afford its replacement. Let it go, and notice that nothing punishes you. And then notice the space. And let the space be a promise rather than a loss, because that is what a space is when somebody has made it on purpose. Shinn was clear that the giving up must come first, the vacuum, then the filling, never the other way round. Because a full life has no room to receive anything, and the deeper mind can see the arrangement perfectly well. You have made room. Something better is on its way into it. There is space in your life now, and space is always filled. Belief 41. Give thanks before it arrives, not after. Shinn taught prayer as a very particular sequence, and she was precise about the order. Prayer, she said, is command and demand, praise and thanksgiving. And she pointed out that the Lord's Prayer is built exactly that way, as a demand for bread that ends in praise, not the other way round. Then she gave the instruction. One should not plead or supplicate, she wrote, but give thanks repeatedly that he has received, not that he will receive, that he has. And she gave a reason that is worth understanding, because otherwise this sounds like a trick you play on yourself. She said that continually affirming establishes the belief in the deeper mind, and then she added a line that ought to be printed somewhere. It would not be necessary to make an affirmation more than once, she said, if one had perfect faith. That is a startling thing to say, and it is completely honest. The repetition is not there to convince the universe of anything. The repetition is there because you do not yet quite believe it, and it is the only tool that works on that particular problem. Now, why thanks specifically? Why not simply a statement? Because gratitude is grammatically impossible about something you consider absent. You cannot thank somebody for a thing you believe you do not have. The mouth will not do it comfortably. So the act of giving thanks forces the position in feeling faster and more completely than any statement of intent can, and feeling is the only currency this thing accepts. That is the whole mechanism. Thanks is the shortest available route to the state of already having. Shinn had one more piece of it that is beautiful and worth doing tonight. She said, the rejoicing that happens while a person is still in the desert is what opens the way. Still in it, not once out of it. And she had watched people do it in the least promising circumstances and get results that made no sense on the evidence available at the time. So tonight, before you go under, thank it. Not vaguely and not as a technique. Say thank you for the amount as though the letter had arrived, the payment had cleared, and the thing were settled, and let it be as ordinary as thanking somebody for passing the salt. That small, undramatic, slightly premature gratitude is the most powerful position available to a human being, and it is available lying flat in the dark with nothing whatsoever to show for it. Thank you for the plenty that is already on its way and already mine. It is done. You can be grateful now. Belief 42. You do not have to go out and check for proof. Shinn was very direct about the moment things get difficult, and she said it is not at the beginning. When a person starts out to demonstrate, she wrote, he should never turn back. And she quoted the old warning that the one who wavers should not think that he will receive anything. Then she said the thing that surprises people. Sometimes, she wrote, this is the most difficult time of all. The temptation comes to give up, to turn back, to compromise. Notice where she placed the danger. Not in the asking, not in the doubt at the start. In the compromise near the end, when a person has been holding something for a while, nothing has visibly happened, and a smaller version of the request appears and looks so much more reasonable. She had a student who refused that beautifully, and she wrote his words down exactly as he said them, because she thought they were the finest statement of position she had ever heard. When I asked the father for anything, he said, I put my foot down, and I say, I will take nothing less than I have asked for, but more. Nothing less than I asked for, but more. That is not arrogance. It is simply refusing to negotiate with yourself on behalf of a fear. And Shinn gave the reason the delays happen where they do, which is the most practical observation in her book. Demonstrations often come at the 11th hour, she said, because that is when a person finally lets go. He stops reasoning, and intelligence gets a chance to work. So, the 11th hour is not the system leaving it late to test you. The 11th hour is simply the first moment most people stop interfering, which means you can have your 11th hour tonight, months early, for free, by putting the whole thing down now rather than when exhaustion finally makes you. There is nothing to check. There is no evidence due tonight. Nobody is going to send confirmation before morning, and looking for it is the one activity that reliably delays it. Goddard put the whole matter in 5 words that are worth taking to sleep. Signs follow, he said. They do not precede. The proof comes after the state. It has never once come before it for anybody in any of these stories, and that order is not a cruelty. It is just the sequence, and you are standing in exactly the right place in it. You do not need proof tonight. The state comes first, and you already have that. Nothing less than you asked for, and you can stop watching now. Belief 43. Set it down somewhere other than your own hands. Shinn told a story about an umbrella, and it is the least impressive story in her book and possibly the most useful. A woman was out in a bad storm and her umbrella blew inside out. She was on her way to call on people she had never met, and she did not want to arrive for the first time carrying a wreck of an umbrella. She could not throw it away because it was not hers. So, standing in the street, in genuine exasperation, she said out loud, I do not know what to do with this. You take charge of it. A moment later, a voice behind her said, Lady, do you want your umbrella mended? There was an umbrella mender standing there. He mended it while she went in and made her call, and when she came out, she had a good umbrella. Shinn's line about it is the one to keep. There is always an umbrella mender at hand, she said, on a person's pathway once the situation has been put down. Now, that is a small problem, and that is exactly why she chose it. It is not a parable about a fortune. It is a demonstration of a mechanism at a scale where you can see the whole thing happening. She had the reason from a metaphysician who explained it to her with an image she never forgot. The only thing that gives anything weight in nature, he said, is gravity. If a boulder could be carried high enough above the planet, there would be no weight in the boulder at all. That is what casting the burden means. Not solving it, not understanding it, lifting the thing out of the field where it is heavy. And here is the part that matters at this hour, because there is almost certainly something in your mind tonight with a number attached to it. You are not being asked to fix it. You are not being asked to feel good about it, or to pretend it does not exist, or to have a plan for it by morning. You are being asked to take your hands off it for the night. It will keep. Whatever it is, it keeps perfectly well overnight, and it will be lighter in the morning than it looks now, not because anything will have changed on paper, but because a rested mind weighs things differently and always has. So set it down, not away, down, out of your hands and onto the floor beside the bed where it can wait. Every difficult thing has an umbrella mender somewhere on the road, and you have never once had to arrange the meeting. You can put it down now. It is not yours to carry tonight. It is handled. Let your hands open and let it go. Belief 44. This is the hour the door is unlocked. Everything in the last few hours has been leading here, because there are only 2 moments in the day when the deeper mind is genuinely open, and you are lying in one of them. Goddard was more specific about this than anybody. Sleep, he said, is the natural door into the deeper mind. And he named the other one alongside it, calling prayer a state akin to sleep, and said these are the 2 gateways. Then he said something about the hour you are in that changes how you will think about bedtime for the rest of your life. Once asleep, he wrote, a person has no freedom of choice. His entire slumber is dominated by his last waking concept of self. Read that slowly. The whole night runs on whatever was in you as you went under. Not what you believed at lunchtime, not what you decided in January. The last thing, and he had a way of describing the approach to sleep that turns a chore into something else entirely. He said that once you understand what sleep has to give, you will set out for it, night after night, as though keeping an appointment with somebody you love. He also said, the plainest version of the whole mechanism. Whatever you have in consciousness as you go to sleep, he wrote, is the measure of your expression in the waking 2/3 of your life. And he made one observation about the machinery that ought to be reassuring rather than unsettling. The deeper mind, he said, never sleeps. Sleep conceals the creative act, while the objective world reveals it, which means the hours you are about to spend are not empty hours. They are the working hours. The visible part of your life, the part with the appointments and the invoices in it, is where you find out what was decided down here. That is an extraordinary claim, and it is also, if you think about it, the most ordinary thing in the world. Everybody already knows that going to bed furious ruins a morning. Everybody has woken up with a mood already installed and no memory of choosing it. This is simply that same observation, taken seriously and used deliberately. And notice what it means about the last however many years. It does not mean you failed. It means nobody ever told you that the gate was standing open every single night and that whatever happened to be in your hands at that moment was going in. So the arithmetic of tonight is very favorable. You do not need years to change this. You need the last 4 minutes of a day, and you have one of those every 24 hours, whether you use it or not, forever. That is a lot of doors. This is your hour, and the door is open. Nothing has to be forced through it. What you carry in now is what goes on working, so carry in something good. Belief 45, you do not argue a belief out, you outvote it. Here is why the old money belief has been so hard to shift, and it is not because it is strong. Goddard described the mechanism exactly. Every feeling, he said, makes an impression on the deeper mind, and unless it is counteracted by a more powerful feeling of an opposite nature, it must be expressed. Counteracted. Not defeated, not disproved, counteracted. The old belief is not sitting in there because it is true or because it is clever. It is sitting in there because it has been voted for thousands of times in small, quiet ballots you never noticed casting. Every clench at a price, every apology for a rate, every not for people like us. You cannot argue with that. Argument is a conscious activity, and the thing you are arguing with is not conscious and is not listening. But it can be outvoted, and that is genuinely good news, because outvoting is not difficult work. It is simply repeated work. Shinn described the same thing without the vocabulary. Continually affirming, she said, establishes the belief in the deeper mind. And then that honest line of hers that it would not be necessary to make an affirmation more than once if a person had perfect faith. Nobody has perfect faith. That is why there is a practice. And the practice has always been the same in all 4 of these teachers, and it has always been at the same 2 times of day. The last few minutes before sleep and the first few minutes after waking, because those are the 2 windows when the guard is not at the door. That is exactly what I made you a free 1-page sheet for. It is your definite aim, 3 goals, 3 things you are grateful for, 3 lines about who you are, and a short evening check. 60 seconds in the morning and 60 at night, with a few short notes on the part almost everyone gets wrong, which is how to feel it rather than recite it. It is the first link in the description, and it costs nothing. Take it and start with it tomorrow morning, because a belief that took 20 years to build can be outvoted in a season if the votes are cast at the hour when they count. You are voting for the good one now, quietly, every night. It is getting easier. Each time it takes less effort, because each time there is less arguing against it. Belief 46, feel the amount, do not recite it. Shinn told a story that sounds like a joke and is actually the clearest demonstration of this in print. A man was staying overnight in a farmhouse. The windows of his room had been nailed shut. In the middle of the night, he woke, feeling suffocated, made his way across the dark room, could not get the window open, and in desperation, smashed the pane with his fist. Cool air poured in. He drew in long breaths of it and slept beautifully for the rest of the night. In the morning, he discovered that he had smashed the glass front of a bookcase. The window had stayed shut all night. He had supplied himself with oxygen, Shinn wrote, simply by his thought of oxygen. Now, nobody is claiming he changed the chemistry of the room. What that story shows with a clarity you almost never get is that his body responded completely to what he believed was true and not at all to what was true. And it responded to a belief he had not reasoned his way into. He did not lie there persuading himself. He heard glass break, felt air, and the whole system relaxed instantly because he had no doubt. That is the state, and it is why reciting rarely works. Goddard was exact about this. The deeper mind, he said, has a distinct distaste for compulsion and responds to persuasion rather than to command. And he gave the rule that explains every failed attempt anybody has ever made with affirmations. Whenever your feeling is in conflict with your wish, feeling will be the victor. The dominant feeling invariably expresses itself. So a person saying, I am wealthy through gritted teeth, in a body that is braced, has just cast a vote for braced. The correction is not to say it better. It is to stop working at the words and go to the feeling directly, which is easier, not harder. Do not say the number. Feel the Tuesday afternoon on the other side of the number. The ordinary one, months from now, where the thing is simply handled and you have stopped thinking about it. Feel the shoulders in that afternoon. Feel how uninteresting it is. That is the whole exercise. And if you do it properly, it should feel slightly boring. Boring is the signature of a state the deeper mind has accepted because nothing you genuinely believe is exciting to think about. You are not persuading anybody tonight. You are simply remembering forward. Feel it as done, not as hoped for, as already handled and slightly dull. Belief 47, yielding, not forcing. Goddard wrote one sentence that saves people years, and it is worth hearing exactly as he put it. Prayer, he said, is the art of yielding to the wish and not the forcing of the wish. And then he described the trap with real precision. Whenever you are in the state of, I should like to, but I cannot, the harder you try, the less you are able to yield to the wish. And he added that in attempting to fix an attitude of mind which the senses deny, effort is fatal. Effort is fatal. From a man who spent 40 years teaching people to change their circumstances, Shinn saw the same wall from her side. If a student tries to force a demonstration through the reasoning mind, she said, he brings it to a standstill. Both of them are describing something you have almost certainly experienced. There is a particular exhausting quality to trying to believe something. It has a strain in it. And the strain itself is the report, because nobody strains toward a thing they consider ordinary, and ordinary is the destination. And Goddard explained why the strain makes things worse, rather than merely wasting time. When the senses confirm the absence of the thing you want, he said, all conscious effort to counteract that suggestion is futile and tends to intensify it. Intensify, not just fail. Every push against the evidence puts more attention on the evidence, and attention is the one thing the deeper mind actually records. That is why the people who work hardest at this often get the least from it, and why somebody who hears it once, shrugs, and casually accepts it will walk off and have it happen. So what is the alternative to trying? Goddard's answer was a state rather than an activity. He said to create a passive condition, a kind of reverie or meditative reflection, similar to the feeling that comes just before sleep. Relaxed, turned away from the outside world, still able to move but with no desire to. And in that state, he said, simply imagine that the wish is realized, not how it was realized, just that it is. He was emphatic that this degree of passivity does not need to be dramatic. All that is necessary, he said, is to create a passive state and feel the wish fulfilled, which is precisely the state you are in right now, tonight, without having done anything to produce it. You are already relaxed. You are already turned away from the day. You could move, but you do not want to. That is not an accident of the hour. That is the working condition, and it arrives free every single night. So there is nothing to try tonight. Trying was never on the list. The instruction is to let go, in a state you have already reached, of a thing you were never required to hold. There is nothing to force. Just let it be true. You are relaxed, and it is easy. That is the whole method. Belief 48, the threshold and exactly how to use it. Goddard gave a set of physical instructions, and they are worth having, because almost nobody knows that he was this practical. Lie flat on your back, he said, with your head on a level with your body. Close your eyes, and then imagine that you are sleepy. Feel it. I am sleepy, so very sleepy. And he described what arrives if you do that for a little while. A far-away feeling, he called it, with a general heaviness and the loss of all desire to move. A pleasant, comfortable rest in which you are not inclined to change position, even though in other circumstances you would not be comfortable at all. That is the threshold. And when you reach it, he said, do only one thing. Imagine that you have realized your wish. Not how. Simply the wish fulfilled, in picture form, and then feel yourself as having already achieved it. Then he added the description of what it should feel like when you come out of it, and this is the most reassuring sentence he ever wrote about this. When you emerge from the moment, he said, it is as though you had been shown the happy and successful end of a play, without having been shown how that end was reached. And having seen the end, whatever happens next, you remain calm, because the end has been perfectly defined. You may well be at that threshold now. It is the state that comes on its own if you are lying still and nothing is asking anything of you. So this is the only instruction in 3 hours that asks anything at all, and it is small. Somewhere in the next few minutes, when the faraway feeling comes, let one scene be there. Not the plan, not the steps, not the arithmetic. One ordinary moment on the other side of it, seen from the inside, with you in it and the money already handled. Hold it lightly and let it be dull. Then let go of it and let the sleep come. That is the entire practice. It takes about 90 seconds, and it happens at a time of day you were going to spend anyway. And if you drift off before you get to it, nothing is lost. What you have been listening to for 3 hours has been going in the whole time. You have seen the end. You do not need the middle. It is defined now, and it is quiet, and you can rest in it. Belief 49, and then the first sentence of the morning. There is one more door, and it opens about 6 hours from now. Shinn thought the morning was as important as the night, and she was specific about it. It is most necessary, she said, to begin the day with right words. Make an affirmation immediately upon waking. The one she gave is worth learning because it asks for nothing in particular and therefore leaves everything open. Thy will be done this day. Today is a day of completion. I give thanks for this perfect day. Miracle shall follow miracle, and wonders shall never cease. Make that a habit, she said, and one will see wonders. And she recorded one morning of her own that shows why this is not merely pleasant. She had picked up a book and read a single line. Look with wonder at that which is before you. And it struck her as her message for the day. So she repeated it to herself again and again. By about noon, a large sum of money had been given to her for a purpose she had been wanting it for. She had another habit that she found strangely effective, and it is charming enough to remember. She used to say silently, all day, do not let me miss a trick. And on the evening she began doing it, something important was told to her. Now, here is why the morning matters as much as the night, and it is a mechanical reason rather than a poetic one. You wake up with whatever was installed while you slept, but you are also, for a few minutes, in the same open condition you were in going down. The gate is still ajar on the way out. And most people spend that exact window reaching for a phone and taking in the first available load of other people's fear. So all that is being suggested is that you get there first, before the phone, before the news, before the first calculation of the day. One sentence, said internally, while still horizontal. Not a routine, not a practice you have to maintain or feel guilty about. One sentence in the same voice you would use to say good morning to somebody you like. That sentence and tonight's picture are the two ends of the same rope, and the rope holds up an entire day. Tomorrow begins well, and you know exactly how to open it. Look with wonder at what is in front of you. Something good is in it. Belief 50, the last thing you decide tonight. Goddard had one image for all of this that is better than any argument, and it belongs at the end. While you are awake, he said, you are a gardener selecting seed, and your conception of yourself as you fall asleep is the seed you drop into the ground. He went further into the theater. By feeling your wish fulfilled and quietly relaxing into sleep, he said, you cast yourself in a starring role to be played on Earth tomorrow, and while you are asleep, you are rehearsed and instructed in your part. Rehearsed while you sleep. Not planning, not straining. Rehearsed by something that never sleeps and has never once failed to express what was given to it. And he had a sentence about the mechanism that is the most encouraging line in all of his work, because it makes the whole thing sound as reliable as plumbing, which is exactly what he meant. The deeper mind, he said, never alters the accepted beliefs of a person. It outpictures them to the last detail. To the last detail, which is a terrifying sentence if the belief is poverty and an extraordinary one if the belief is provision. And the only difference between the two is what happened in the last few minutes before sleep. So this is the last decision of the day, and it is the only one that has been asked of you tonight. Not to believe anything you do not believe, not to feel certain, not to have solved anything. Simply to let the last thing in your mind be good. That is it. That is the whole of what these four people taught, underneath the stories and the decrees and the diagrams. There is a moment every night when the ground is open and something is going in either way, and you are allowed to choose what. Everything else follows from that, slowly, in ordinary ways, through channels nobody predicts, over months that look uneventful from the inside. Sleep is the door, Goddard said. What you take in as a feeling, you bring out as a condition. So let us take in something good and then let go of all of it and let the night do the rest. The last thing in your mind tonight is plenty, steady, unremarkable plenty, and it is already growing while you rest. The rest of the night. Nothing that follows asks anything of you. There is no more teaching, no more stories. If you have already drifted, this will reach you anyway, and that is rather the point of it. So let your shoulders come down and simply let this go past you the way music does. You are provided for, not one day from now, when a figure finally changes. Now, tonight, in the middle of a life that has already been carrying you for years without your help. There is enough. There has always been enough, and more is on its way toward you by ordinary means that you do not have to arrange or understand. Money comes to you easily and often, from expected places and from places you would never have thought of. It comes in quietly, it does its work, and more comes behind it. You are the kind of person that money moves toward. It has moved toward you before. It knows the address. Feel that as a plain description of something quietly true rather than as a wish. You are safe with it. You always were. Whatever you were told about money before you were old enough to check, you may set it down now. It belonged to somebody else's decade. It was never a law, and it was never about you. There is no burnt match anywhere in your life tonight. Everything is in order, and everything is being cared for, and the small things will fall into place on their own in the morning. You are at ease about money. Say it slowly, in the quietest voice you have. You are at ease about money. It comes up and nothing tightens. A number appears and you look at it plainly. A price is named and your shoulders stay where they are. That ease is yours now, and it is the only thing that was ever required. Your bills are paid easily. Your work is valued and it is paid well, and both halves of that arrive together. There is more than enough coming in, and it comes in regularly, and there is always something left over. You give easily and you receive easily, and it is one motion, and it never runs down. There is plenty behind you and plenty in front of you. You can afford to be steady. You can afford to wait for the right thing. You can afford to say no and mean it kindly and sleep well afterwards. Opportunity finds you. It has found you before, more than once, and it will find you again, and next time you will be ready for it, and you will know it when it arrives. The right people are already on their way toward you. Somebody you have not met yet is going to be glad they found you. The work you did today was enough. What you did not finish will still be there in the morning, and it will be easier then than it looks tonight. Nothing is late, nothing has been lost, nothing you need has gone anywhere. You are wanted and useful and paid, and there is nothing greedy in any of that. The good years are ahead of you. You are not behind. You have never been behind. There was no schedule handed to you at birth that you failed to keep, and the only pace that has ever mattered is the one you are actually moving at. Nothing worth having is behind you. Nothing that matters was missed. The people in tonight's stories began late, almost all of them, from ordinary rooms, from wash tubs and firehouses and back streets and rented halls where 30 people came. You are in good company, and you are exactly where the story starts. Good things are making their way toward you. Some of them are already close. You have time. You have far more time than you have been told. Now let one picture come and hold it lightly. Not the plan, not the steps, not the arithmetic of how, just the ordinary moment on the other side of it. A morning, months from now, when the thing you have been reaching for has become so normal that you have stopped noticing it. The account that simply covers it. The bill that is simply paid. The quiet in the house where the worry used to be. See yourself there. Notice how calm it is. Notice how little there is to celebrate, because nothing is happening. It is just a Tuesday, and it is handled. That is the feeling. That unremarkable ownership, as though it had always been yours, and there had never been any question about it. Stay in that a while. There is no hurry, and nothing else is expected of you tonight. Whatever you were turning over when this began, the number, the conversation you rehearsed, the thing you could not solve, set it down where you are. It keeps perfectly well overnight. You are safe, you are well, you are provided for. The part of you that has been braced all day can let go of that now. There is nothing to guard against at this hour, and nothing is required of you until morning. And as you go under, let this be the last of it. It is already yours. You do not have to chase it, or earn it tonight, or prove anything to anyone. You only have to keep the picture, and let the part of you that never sleeps go on quietly arranging the world to match it. It will. It has been doing that your whole life. Tonight you have simply given it something better to work with. Sleep now. Everything is working out for you, and it is working out while you rest. We will pick this up another night.